Good morning, welcome to this week's episode of Learn with Lorna, episode number 226, Building Bridges. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn and I am the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service. We have 4 archive centres in the Highlands of Scotland, in Inverness, Fort William, Portree and Wick, and in these offices we look after and give access to historic records relating to the Highlands. So a whole range of material from the records of the Highland Council and the predecessors of the Council right through to records given to us by families, businesses, estates, all sorts of things for you to come in and have a look at. This series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland and there is no payment or subscription required to take part in this series. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we very much appreciate that, so thank you very much if you have. So welcome to the last of this current run of Learn with Lorna, the last one until we break for the summer and return on the 4th of September with an episode on school magazines. So I want, before I start this week's episode, as always, to say thank you for all of your support and interest, all of your comments and feedback, for the many lovely conversations that I have had and that my colleagues have had with Learn with Lorna viewers in our search rooms and elsewhere in the post office and in Tesco's and all sorts of other places. So thank you for your interest in the series and in our work. It's really appreciated. Thank you too for the donations that have come in. It really makes a difference to us, and also for the archive collections that have been deposited with us as a result of people watching Learn with Lorna. That is really appreciated. Every aspect of the support that we get for our work that you give us having watched this series is really appreciated, both by me and by the wider team. So I wanted to start this final episode of this run by saying thank you for all of those things. Perhaps appropriately for this episode, we're looking at the subject of building bridges, something at the heart of Learn with Lorna, I think. Bridges have so much significance and they've played so many roles throughout Highland history, and of course they form part of many of our place names. Carbridge, Spian Bridge, Dalman Bridge, Nethy Bridge. There's so many place names that the bridge is central to the story of the place. And of course many have been constructed to link places and reduce journeys. I've already done a whole episode on the bridging of the 3 firths, the building of the Keswick Bridge, the Cromarty Bridge and the Dornoch Bridge, cutting off huge amounts of travel times in the Highlands and making journeys much shorter. So I won't cover those again in this episode, but if you are interested in those, then do go and check that episode out on the crossing of the 3 firths. But let's look at the Kyleskew Bridge as another example of a bridge that has made a huge difference to a local area and changed travel times. In June 1978, the Highland Regional Council asked Ove Arup and Partners Scotland to prepare a feasibility study for a bridge, and construction began in the summer of 1981 with the approach roads and the bridge itself the following year. The new bridge replaced a ferry between Kyleskew and Kylestrome, which was 400 metres to the east. This was the end of an era, and it also meant redundancy for the ferry workers, including Walter Brewer, who was principal ferryman and employed by the county and region for 30 years. At the Archive Centre we hold records relating to the construction and the official opening of the bridge, including the Morrison Construction Journal Kyleskew Souvenir Edition of August 1984, in which Hamish Steers of Ove Arup described the design of the bridge. The final design was developed in order that the road and structure should be in sympathy with the general atmosphere of the countryside, and wherever possible goes with the grain of the topography and does not make major intrusions into the landscape. Another important factor in the design of this bridge was wind speed, during which construction was recorded at over 100 miles per hour. The high horizontal loadings could not be transferred directly to the abutments only and were taken out by providing the widened base of the intermediate supports. The wind speed was mentioned in an article of the Northern Times of the 10th of August 1984. Highland Regional Council Roads Director Keith McFarlane said it was necessary to warn drivers, particularly of high-sided vehicles, by using a sign coupled with an anemometer, which would give a continuous indication of wind speed on the bridge, as it was so significant. Now, when this bridge was opened, the children of Durness Primary School made a scrapbook of stories and drawings and photographs and newspaper cuttings about the bridge's construction and the official opening, and we hold this as well. And in one of the cuttings, Margaret Ross, who was 84, recalled that when she was about 7 years old, her father had great difficulty in getting their sheep to step aboard the boat which then ferried livestock across the waters of Kyleskew. However, she had a pet lamb which followed her everywhere, so her father asked her to go onto the boat, and her lamb followed her, and eventually the rest of the flock followed. Great stories. The final ferry sailed on Wednesday the 8th of August 1984 with a commemorative trip aboard the MV Maid of Glencoe. Flares and rockets were discharged to signal the end of this centuries-old passage. The bridge was costed at 2.75 million and eventually cost £4 million. And it opened to traffic in July 1984, formally being opened by the Queen on the 8th of August 1984. This Kyleskew Bridge has subsequently been awarded Category A listed status by Historic Environment Scotland because of its visually striking and technical innovation, and it has also now been officially renamed to its Gaelic name Drochach Aculas Cuank. It is, if you're not familiar with the bridge, the most beautiful bridge, in my opinion. So have a wee look at it if you are not familiar with it. And that, of course, is the most common reason for building a bridge, to link places and to make life easier for those who live in those places, to cut journey times, to literally bridge a gap between two places. But bridges can also be a key part of warfare and military strategy. The old bridge at John O'Groats, it's hay fever, my eyes are watering, my nose is blocked, it's great fun. The old bridge at John O'Groat Mill is believed to be the oldest military bridge in the Highlands, and certainly in Caithness, being built in 1651. But there are various bridges across the Highlands which were built as part of warfare or military control. Multiple bridges across the Highlands were built by General Wade and his successor Major William Caulfield in the attempts to assert military control over the Highlands during the Jacobite risings of the 1700s. Dulcie Bridge near Nairn, Farragig Bridge at the side of Loch Ness, Little Garve Bridge near Garve, the Old Spey Bridge at Granton, and many others fall into this category. So these are bridges not built for the ease and convenience of a local population. These are bridges built as part of a road network constructed to impose control over a landscape. Another example of this is High Bridge in Speanbridge, and here is some of its story from Ambala. Known as High Bridge, this bridge over the River Spean was built in 1736 as part of the military road building scheme undertaken by Lieutenant General Wade for the government. The bridge, a major engineering achievement, is 80 feet above the water. The three spans were 40 feet, 50 feet and 40 feet wide. High Bridge was the scene of the first shot fired in the Jacobite Rising of 1745. Donald MacDonald of Turnadris, with 11 men of Keppoch and a piper, met at the inn at High Bridge to prevent the advance of 2 companies of Royal Scots. In order to make the redcoats think that the place was heavily defended, the piper played his loudest and the men spread out among the bushes, making as much noise as possible. The redcoats fled, but more of Keppoch's men arrived and set off in pursuit. 5 redcoats were killed and others were wounded or surrendered. You'll maybe remember some time ago I did an episode about the Caithness Home Guard, a collection that we hold in Nucleus, and that included references to the plans for blowing up bridges if enemies made it, or if enemy agents made it to Caithness during the Second World War. So bridges can really play all sorts of parts in warfare. They're strategically important, and as we have seen in recent years, control of bridges has always been paramount in time of conflict, because they can move an army forwards or they can stop an army in its tracks if it's not there. So General Wade is a name very much associated with bridges in the Highlands. And perhaps the other most prominent name associated with bridges and all sorts of other infrastructure is Thomas Telford. And Telford shaped multiple aspects of the Highlands landscapes and infrastructure during his time. I read that he was responsible for the construction of over 1,000 bridges in the Highlands and Islands alone from 1801 onwards. Over 1,000 bridges. If that fact is accurate, that is extraordinary. Now, Telford had inspected the state of the roads in the Highlands, and his finding had led to the Scottish Highland Roads and Bridges Act 1803, which established the Commissioners for Highland Roads and Bridges. And we hold numerous documents relating to this body in our county council records and elsewhere, and they're full of detail and full of information, reports into the work of the commissioners and the construction and repair of various bridges. And I wanted to share with you some notes from my colleague Jen in Nucleus, which illustrates the legacy that Telford left. Many of the bridges across Caithness were built or designed by Telford, including Achengale, Wester, Dunbeath, Lathronwheel, Wick and Berrydale. Although many of these have now been replaced by more modern bridges, some of the old bridges remain as a lasting testament to Telford's work around Caithness. The Service Bridge at Wick, also known as Wick Harbour Bridge, was originally created as a temporary bridge while Telford's bridge was being replaced in 1877. It became a permanent fixture at the request of the town. It was replaced later by a design done by Blythe and Blythe, an engineering company from Edinburgh, and was one of the projects that civil engineer Mary Molly Ferguson worked on. Mary was the first female senior partner of a civil engineering firm in 1948, spending many years with the company. She was also the first woman to be elected as a full member of the Institute of Civil Engineers in 1957. She worked on a few different projects around the Highlands, mainly focusing on paper mills, water purification schemes, sewers and bridges. And reading that made me reflect on a conversation that I'd had, I've maybe mentioned it on here, a conversation I had with somebody who runs local groups, which I've given talks to, who was telling me how much she wanted to be an engineer and how much she wanted to go into that world, and was told by her teacher that women couldn't do that. And there's someone doing it way ahead of that. So Telford leaves that legacy in Caithness and elsewhere. In Skye, perhaps the most well-known Telford Bridge is close to the Sligachan Hotel, and you may well be familiar with it as it features in many of the images of the hotel with the Cuillin dominating the background. That was built in around 1820, probably replacing an earlier bridge or ford. And both that Caithness extract and that example from Skye really illustrate the fact that many of our bridges have had various iterations over the years. This is an extract from an article that I wrote some years ago for the Northern Times newspaper about Bonar Bridge. And again, it highlights the story of multiple iterations over the years. Bonar Bridge in the parish of Creech lies on the boundary between the counties of Sutherland and Ross and Cromarty, and has been a prime place for crossing the Dornoch Firth for hundreds of years, with two previous bridges on the site of the current one. On the 12th of October 1810, the Sutherland County Roads Trustees Minute Book reveals that the trustees read aloud a letter from famed civil engineer Thomas Telford, who had undertaken a survey of the area and proposed the erection of an iron bridge across the Dornoch Firth. The proposed bridge would cost around £9,736, 6 shillings and 8pence, and would comprise a single iron span of around 150 feet, and would be the first of its kind in the north of Scotland, and one of only a few in Britain. There were several considerations in building something new and somewhat untried. Specifically skilled contractors would have to be brought in, excluding by necessity local tradesmen. The heritors would need to be convinced, the landowners, and the waterbed would need to be tested for suitability. The first 2 points were settled relatively easily. Telford recommended the architect John Simpson of Shrewsbury and builder John Cargill, both of whom he was working with on the Caledonian Canal, and the heritors were happy to bow to his superior knowledge. The third point was slightly more problematic, and when Simpson and Cargill did manage to examine the ground, they discovered that there was no underlying bedrock, necessitating a change in the design to incorporate a single iron arch with two smaller stone arches. This change reduced the initial cost to £8,679 6 shillings and sixpence, but created the necessity for a contingency fund if the contractors were to be able to keep their required 3-year warranty after construction. Plans were approved, construction commenced, and following a brief hiatus due to bad weather, the bridge was finally completed by the 11th of November 1812. Matthew Davidson, who was present at the opening, wrote to the chairman of the Bonar Bridge Committee, "The whole of the mason work, ironwork and approaches to the bridge are executed in a very handsome, substantial and workmanlike manner, and I flatter myself that Bonar Bridge will long remain a monument of the munificence of government and the public spirit of the landowners of the county of Sutherland." And that first bridge stood firm for 80 years before being swept away in a flood in January 1892, causing chaos to the village and to the many people who used it to travel between north and south. The matter was raised with the Sutherland County Road Board on the 12th of February 1892, and a joint committee with representatives from both Ross and Cromarty and Sutherland was formed, with the understanding that the cost for any work required would be split equally between the two counties. Tenders were gathered for the work, for clearing the wreckage, and the contract was given to George Cowie and Sons of Buckie, who did the clearing for £382, clearing way for the construction of a new bridge which was completed by the 7th of July 1893, to the delight of locals who were given a holiday to mark the event. This second bridge, coincidentally, also lasted for 80 years, being replaced in 1973 by the current structure. Cost is always an issue when it comes to large infrastructure projects, and it always has been, and I would imagine it always will be. And bridges are no exception to this. We often find when we're looking into stories of bridges and roads and things being built that the cost is the paramount issue, because of course it's often being funded by local authority or public subscription, and they need to know what it's going to cost. And so historically, some bridges have been funded by tolls. In November 2024, my colleague Rory, our Lochaber archivist, put up a post on Lochaber Archive Centre's Facebook page about the Ballachulish Bridge, and it flew. It had over 1,100 likes and dozens of shares, as people shared their memories of the difference that this bridge has made since its construction. Now, the Ballachulish Bridge was not a toll bridge, but it was proposed to be originally. And we hold within our County of Argyll papers at Lochaber Archive Centre a document entitled Feasibility Study and Proposals Relating to the Construction of a Toll Bridge at Ballachulish. It includes some background information on the need for a bridge, which had been called for over 60 years, the potential to charge for its use if necessary, thereby making it self-financing. You really get the feeling of the body who have put the report together really kind of arguing for, look, if it needs to be a toll bridge, that's fine, but please can we have a bridge here? So here's some background from that document. Ballachulish Ferry lies on the main arterial route of the West Highlands, 13 miles from Fort William, 36 miles from Oban. A bridge would save 19 miles of bad road around the side of Loch Leven, or 16 miles in the case of traffic from Glencoe, and would remove the bottleneck of a ferry which is subject to considerable delay, weight restrictions and daylight operation only. The Highland Transport Board report early in 1967 added its voice to the opinion from many quarters that a bridge should be constructed as a matter of urgency. Not only would it save journey time between Oban and Fort William and bring quantifiable benefits to all commercial traffic, but it would also have important social repercussions in morale of an area which is kernel to the economic revival of the West Highlands. In the particular case of the pulp mill at Fort William, it is estimated that the extra cost of driving heavy vehicles around the loch will be as high as $40,000 to $50,000 per annum at present day prices in the mid-1970s. Significant savings in fuel, if the bridge was built, would then lead to import savings. If no bridge is built, very substantial capital costs will shortly have to be incurred by the government in bringing the Lochside Road up to standard. A bridge is a desirable entity. On commercial and economic grounds, it is an urgent necessity. Government funds for road projects are allocated according to a system of priorities, and we believe that this bridge is needed urgently, but in this review we have not considered its relative importance against other projects in the Highlands. So far, however, no provision has been made for it in the official road programmes up to 1972, and it may be that no funds will be available for a number of years thereafter. It appears from the evidence so far available that a bridge at Ballachulish would be a viable project, and if government funds for a toll-free bridge are wanting, then it is submitted that there is conclusive case for allowing a self-financing, non-profit-making bridge to be built. Provision could be made for its acquiral by government at any future time and at favourable terms, probably at original cost price, as part of the trunk road system. Such a toll bridge would thus replace a toll ferry with all its limitations, provide better facilities for the public, and save money for the government. In the end, the Ballachulish Bridge, which carries the A82 across Loch Leven, was opened in 1975 with no tolls. A steel truss cantilever bridge, it was built by the Cleveland Bridge and Engineering Company, and rumour has it that the bridge was never finished as there is one rivet missing. Probably the most famous and controversial tolls on a bridge in the Highlands were those on the Skye Bridge from its opening in 1995 until they were scrapped in 2004. Incidentally, in 2008, the Scottish Government abolished all tolls on bridges by Act of Parliament. Let's have a look at the story of the Skye Bridge, which marks its 30th anniversary this year, with some notes sent over to me by my colleague Catherine in Skye and Loch Alsh Archives. In 1989, the contract to design and build the Skye Bridge was awarded to Miller Dwydag. Excuse me, because that's not great pronunciation. Which was a consortium composed of Miller Construction, Dwydag Systems International, and the Bank of America. The design was a single-span concrete arch supported by two piers resting on caissons in the loch. The project was funded by Private Finance Initiative, and in return the companies were licensed to charge a toll. The Skye Bridge was opened by the Secretary of State for Scotland, Michael Forsyth, on Monday the 16th of October 1995, linking Kyle of Loch Alsh and Kyleachin via Elan Ban. The bridge proved controversial from the outset due to the high level of tolls which were applied in both directions. SCAT, Skye and Kyle Against Tolls, was constituted in the late summer of 1995 to protest against these tolls. Following years of organised protest, during which many of the SCAT members were prosecuted for refusal to pay the charges, the tolls were finally officially lifted in December 2004. And as I say, now since 2008 it has become an Act of Parliament has been passed to prevent tolls being paid on bridges. Now, so far I have only spoken about bridges designed to carry horse-drawn vehicles or road traffic, but of course there are all sorts of other bridges around the Highlands. I could have looked at the beautiful pack horse bridges that we have and the many footbridges which have long histories. I also haven't looked today at any of Inverness's interesting bridges over the years, so I see another episode in the pipeline. But I wanted to finish by looking at bridges designed to carry not roads but railways. We hold many records relating to railway construction in the Highlands, including many records relating to bridges. And I thought, rather than read technical specifications and things to you, that probably the easiest solution would be to read to you two sections from the book Spanning the Gaps, Highland Railway Bridges and Viaducts, which was written by Anne Mary Patterson, who was a great supporter of the Archive Service and also very personally connected to some of these engineers who built these bridges. So it was written by Anne Mary Patterson. It was published by the Highland Railway Society in 2017. I want to share with you the sections on Badengorm and Findhorn. Badengorm Burn. The weather in the middle of June 1914 was exceptionally hot. On the 18th of June there was a cloudburst in the hills above Carbridge. Upstream from the railway, the road bridge collapsed due to the volume of water, soil off the fields, trees and boulders. The debris continued its journey until it met the railway bridge, a narrow masonry arch of 15 feet over what is normally a small stream. Unfortunately, a train from Glasgow arrived at this very moment. As the engine crossed the bridge, the driver, Murdo Ross, felt a lurch to the left and the automatic brake came on. Murdo got out of the cab, went back to see what was happening and saw that the bridge had partially collapsed. As Murdo returned to the engine to talk to the fireman, Charlie Ross, the whole bridge collapsed. The fourth coach fell into the water below, killing 5 passengers. The third and the fifth carriages tilted over. James Barron, son of the editor of the Inverness Courier, took a photograph that was made into a postcard. I always find that extraordinary. In it there appear to be a number of onlookers who, it is said, came on charabanc outings from Inverness and other places to view the scene of the disaster. No doubt the horrors of World War I that broke out shortly after put a stop to this curiosity. Rebuilding the bridge took 3 weeks and the line then reopened. 9 years later, on the 8th of July 1923, severe thunderstorms led to acute flooding again in the Carbridge district. This resulted in the collapse of 6 rail and road bridges, the levelling of nearly half a mile of railway embankments, and the destruction of existing flood protection works. The contractors managed to reopen the road on the 15th of July. Such was the damage to the railway that it did not reopen until the 31st of July. Thankfully, there was no loss of life in those floods. So bridges, as well as being strategically important, they can be controversial because of tolls, they can make life easier for local communities, they can also be scenes of tragedy. If we move on to the Findhorn, the viaduct, now incidentally, all viaducts are bridges, but not all bridges are viaducts, because I was wanting to make sure that I had my facts right here, so there you go. River Findhorn. The viaduct, built on a curve, has 9 twin double steel Warren truss spans of 130 feet on masonry piers. This is a viaduct that anyone will know if they have travelled to Inverness from the south. You can see it very clearly from the road. You would go across it on the train. It's a really beautiful landmark. The approaches at both ends are small masonry arches. The maximum height is 144 feet and the overall length 1,336 feet. It was built for double track, but only one track has ever been laid. Mild steel was used throughout except for the bed plates, which are cast iron. The piers are of granite quarried in the district. The ones in the river are built on piles and the others in dug-out foundations. The downhill end of each span is fixed, the uphill end on rollers. The parts are riveted together except the end cross bracing on the uphill end of each girder, which could not be got to rivet and are therefore bolted. Sir John Fowler of the Forth Railway Bridge fame. Now you may remember I did an episode on engineers, so I spoke a bit about John Fowler there. Sir John Fowler of Forth Rail Bridge fame was consulting engineer on the new line. Although he was not in good health by the time of this railway line's construction, he did visit the viaduct during the period when a steam crane was in use. Thomas Mackay, in his biography of Sir John Fowler, tells us that the first plan was for the railway to take a circuitous route through the village of Tomatin, crossing the river on a small bridge, and Sir John persuaded the directors to take a shorter route, cutting off more than a mile from the total distance. This, of course, meant less revenue from fares and the extra expense of construction. The stone came from a quarry at Kemnay in Aberdeenshire, the same as for the Forth Rail Bridge. Sir John's influence is seen not only in the stone, but also in the viaduct's resemblance to the approaches of the Forth Bridge. John Ross had the contract for the line north from Findhorn to Kildoich near Daviot. His first railway job was on the Helmsdale to Wick line, and in the early 1890s he had been the contractor for the Black Isle line from Murivord to Fortrose, and then the first section of the direct line from Aviemore to Carbridge. So he has been hugely involved in the construction of railway lines and bridges across the Highlands by the point that the Findhorn Viaduct is being constructed. The spectacular nature of this new line caught the public imagination. John Ross organised an excursion on the 4th of July 1894 to view the construction of the viaduct over the Findhorn. As the expedition left Inverness, it must have caused quite a stir, because 2 wagons and a brake van were hitched onto a large powerful traction engine with a whistling mechanism specially fitted for the occasion. It seems to have been a jolly and a noisy affair, with refreshment stops, no doubt alcoholic, as it progressed along the road. The Scottish Highlander described what the visitors saw when they arrived. The peaceful river, out of which the massive pillars which form the masonry seem to grow, the many and various puffing and snorting steam engines, the hundreds of navvies, the beautiful green herbage of the Highland Glen, present a picture which will remain in the mind's eye of the fortunate spectators for a lifetime. The photograph of the group shows a large number of bottles as well as people. It looks a jolly affair. The young man sitting cross-legged nearest the camera, if you Google this photograph you'll be able to see it, is Murdoch MacDonald, who was a pupil of Murdoch Patterson, who was a relative of Anne Mary Patterson, who wrote the book. He went on to work in Egypt on the Aswan Dam and to form his own company of consulting engineers, Murdoch MacDonald and Partners, now part of Mott MacDonald. This company is still involved in the work on the railways in the Highlands. So it's quite extraordinary how many significant people have been involved in construction of bridges in the Highlands, from Wade and Telford through to Fowler, through to Murdoch MacDonald, and so on, the Pattersons. But also how much these bridges have changed and influenced the lives of the people who live near them, both for good and for bad. I'll definitely do another episode on bridges to look at the other roles, spiritual role of bridges as something that crosses between things, all sorts of other important things and interesting things around bridges. But in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed some of these stories. I know that there are people who watch Learn with Lorna who are really, really interested in infrastructure, railways, engineers, and the harnessing of landscapes. So I hope you've enjoyed some of these stories of bridges in the Highlands. That's Learn with Lorna finished until the 4th of September, so I will very much looking forward to see you then. I hope in the meantime this one bridges the gap for you. Sorry, that was truly bad and just came to me as I was saying it. So I'll look forward to seeing you on the 4th of September. In the meantime, please remember that all episodes, all 225 other episodes, are available on YouTube to watch back, so please do go and spend some time doing that. And also please come into our archive centres to look at these collections. I know that Learn with Lorna viewers do come in and do tell our staff that that's why they've come in. It's really appreciated. So please do come in, have a look at some of these records, spend some time on our websites, Highland Archive Service and Ambala, looking through our content and our exhibitions. As always, thank you so much for all your support over this last year and over the, 5 years of Learn with Lorna. I think we're in our 6th year now. So thank you very, very much, and I will see you again in September, always assuming everybody wants to come back and join me then. A reminder that this series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland's a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of events. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we really are incredibly grateful for that. Thank you.